everyone, hope you're all doing well, and thanks for tuning into Moose Motion Animation. And in this video today, we'll be going on an adventure, you could say, through my stop motion studio today. I do say. Hello, Holly. Boop. And welcome to my clay creation station. So this is the art cart, pretty much where all my characters, well, make their start. Basically, I like to refer it as the color bank. However, there is some basic tools in here. Not much, but, you know, you got your basic scissors for opening up packages, and a few some automotive tools that, you know, made their way from my garage into my claymation studio. Generally, the small pliers actually work very well. There's a couple big ones too, but those are just downstairs at the moment, and, well, there's some files and various other tools in there. They don't get used too often, but it's just a good space for them. Now, as far as my clay inventory goes, I usually like to keep things separated in Ziploc bags with each separate colors. The top ones usually are the rare color banks. As you can see, black is a very rare one due to the fact that I do so many different Godzillas. But this is usually where I keep the less common colors, or the ones that I've basically been kind of using a lot of lately. And if we adventure down here, I arguably have probably more clay than some art stores. This is pretty much where a vast majority of big chunks of colors are. This is all like orange area. I got blues back here. There's a bunch of greens, ton of red. My purple inventory is but really big. Yeah. I probably need to make a purple dragon at some point or do something with that, because that needs to get And if we adventure to the bottom half of the tray here, this is usually where I keep, well, the lesser used colors, all my tan stuff and pinks. Stuff that doesn't really get used very often up until this point because of, well, the new evolved Godzilla. And this is usually where I keep my unopened packages of clay. As you can see, a lot of this other stuff in Ziploc bags is taken over. All this stuff has to be gone through at some point, but there's really no need for it right now, so it can just hang out at the bottom. But I usually recommend keeping your stuff, well, separated in colors, because it makes a big difference in the end, because it doesn't get all mixed up. So this is pretty much where all my claymation characters make their start, is this little art cart. So we're on to the next step, which is basically the tools and inventory for all the other bits and pieces for making the Armature clay dolls. Now, this upper shelf mainly consists of pretty basic supplies, as well as some leftover ones that have just been kind of put up here to, well, be forgotten about. I hate to say it. So this first little treasure trove of goodies usually consists of just a bunch of little Lego pieces that I don't mind sacrificing for my Armature dolls. Usually small bits that I can use for frames, like arms, or joint components that I can basically use for, you know, arms, legs, and various other things like that. So it's essentially parts that are, you know, kind of sacrificial Lego bits, for lack of a better term, where my armature wire, or the aluminum armature wire that I tend to use, won't actually do the trick. And there seems to be plenty of that up here as well, in a variety of different gauges. This is basically all the stuff that I use for kaijus now. As you can see, it's quite a bit thicker than the old stuff. This is about a 1/16 of an inch. This stuff's nearly twice that, at an 1/8 of an inch. And of course, there's a lot of tinfoil up here too. This is also very important to have for stop motion animators, especially if you're doing Godzilla and dinosaur stuff, because, well, your stuff tends to get pretty heavy. And if you're not using this to basically help fill in some of the gaps, you're going to end up using a lot of clay, and it's going to be a lot heavier than you want it to, and things are basically just going to kind of do this. And nobody wants that. Now, the forgotten goodies. Now, honestly, I'm kind of going into this part of the video blind. I don't really remember what a lot of these actually holds at this point. Let's see if the labels hold true. However, I do kind of know what's in this part. This might be a little morbid for some people, because I do have a pair of scrat eyeballs in here. For a lot of my characters, I tend to have a pair of spare eyes sometimes. I do apologize. So, yeah. Those are usually kind of an essential replacement. And then I do actually have, I guess, car eye replacement bits. This is for an A86 that I made a long time ago, and basically there are 12 tiny little light components that consist of different variety of sizes. So basically I can make a pop-up headlight effect. So you replace each one of these for every 2 frames to give it the effect that the lights are basically folding up and down. It's quite cool, but definitely time consuming. Now, let's see what we've got here. This, I'm pretty sure, is a tea set. Yeah. I remember making this one a long time ago, but... oh god. Honestly, there isn't, anything too fancy about this. This is just old clay bits that have... hey, cool, there's a bone in here. But, yeah. Guess this is just some plateware that I decided to make a long time ago. Can't remember what this was for, but it's here if ever needed. Okay, so this one's actually pretty cool. There's some spare Jack Skellington heads in here. So this one might be a little morbid as well, unfortunately for some viewers, but yeah, there's a couple spare heads in here. At some point I have to return to that character and probably make hundreds of these things, so that'll probably be a Halloween special at some point. Ooh, the 100 heads of, well, Jack Skellington, because that's pretty much how many were used for the actual film as well. And I'll admit, these last little bits of shelving here basically just kind of contain old remnants or junkyard components of, well, what used to be that this channel was about making claymation cars, but, well, they're left up here to rust now. We do Godzilla stuff. Now we're onto the second shelf on this video tour, where things get a little bit more interesting, you could say. There's a couple more things that basically, well, derive more towards actual claymation creation. Now this little box is kind of boring, I'll admit, but it does actually hold some very interesting and handy tools. Now these are basically just for holding skulls and various other components of my Armature dolls in the oven that usually need like a hole or rod that they will be mounted on later on. And this basically just holds them upright so they don't touch anything and maintain usually their horns and all their nice pointy surfaces. There's also one in here that's kind of a ball point that is very handy for, well, usually working on the skull when it's still soft. So that way you can stick it on the rod and basically just kind of, you know, move things around without actually having to put your hands on the actual sculpture, because then at that point you usually have problems with having to re-sculpt things because you slowly mush it down, obviously, through time. I even actually made a small holder for this one, so that way it can actually just sit in there too. Then there's a couple other ones that basically just have a variety of different gauge wires on them for different, well, characters obviously. So these are actually quite handy, and it's good to actually just have a bunch of them. It's pretty easy to make. Essentially it's just an aluminum rod with a bit of oven baked clay at the bottom. As you can see, this one's been used quite a few times, so yeah, handy things to have. And then just behind these are, well, some of my odd rubber sculpting tools, the ones that I don't use very often. They're kind of odd shaped. This one's really interesting. This one has a weird spear in it. So, yeah. I have a collection of them, but I don't use these very often. However, they do come in handy when you do need them. Now I'll briefly touch up on these little clamps. I don't really use these very often, once again, but they're usually very handy to have. If something breaks, it's nice to have them, because that way you can basically just kind of clamp it in place and walk away. And they're being very small, they're very versatile. Now this part's obviously a lot of painting supplies. The colors that I probably don't use very often, except for the black and the browns, I do use those quite frequently. But a lot of the time, this is where I usually store my custom colors as well. You can see those two in the odd containers that do not belong to a certain label of any kind. Now we are on to the third shelf, which is usually the business end of things, which I like to refer to as organized chaos over here. Now, obviously this shelf, a good chunk of it is still painting supplies with painting brushes, but a vast majority of it over here is kind of what I use on a daily basis. So in here you'll find all kinds of weird little trinkets and tools. These are basically known as ball stylists. They're very handy. They're kind of, well, for lack of a better description, almost like the rubber sculpting tools that I like to use a lot, but those ones obviously are nowhere near as flexible. Now, a lot of rubber sculpting tools usually make their way in here. There's a variety of different ones. Those ones aren't usually the ones I commonly use. The ones that I use, well, on a regular basis are downstairs in an animation station right now. We'll probably make a tour on one of those at some point, but probably not during this video. If this video does well, I'll probably do, well, obviously more little stop motion tours. Start to get this stuff in focus, but there's a couple handy carving tools in there. Now those are honestly Great, thanks Grandpa. These I put to use a lot more than I'm willing to admit. A couple weird little sewing trinkets, obviously a lot of different paint brushes, and some weird screw end things, and some rakes. These are honestly quite handy too, the tiny ones in particular. These are great for getting in those tiny, hard to reach places. Apparently I don't know how to speak English halfway through this tutorial. But yeah, honestly, getting a nice set of rakes is very handy for sculpting. And I got a pair of jewelry cutter pliers here. Those are obviously getting used quite a lot. And I have some spare spikes in here. So there's a lot of weird little trinkets and components into this part. Basically, this is kind of what I use on a regular basis and kind of ends up getting thrown in here. I do have more tools, but I'll probably could do an entire other video on just tools alone. And if you guys would like to see that, I could probably do that at some point, but we're just focusing on basically the studio as a whole today. Now, welcome to my craft tackle box. It's no longer a fishing box. This one's usually kind of just holding a lot of weird miscellaneous things that are handy to have usually in the studio, where I keep a couple of my old hot glue guns, supplies for them, tripod equipment, screws, you know, just anything that's kind of like tool related. I like to kind of keep in this thing. It's nice to have around. These little files have come in handy quite a lot, so I'll admit these things are quite nice to have. They're very old, but kind of one of those things that from my garage, from my car working days, kind of ended up over here. And so, yeah, just kind of one of those random trinket things I admit that probably serves less use than it needs, but it's nice to have. And this other half of the shelf, well, I'll try to keep things brief. This is kind of where I used to store my colors, but obviously we've gone over that already. And I have a far much better, more efficient system at this point. I used to store everything in just Tupperware containers, but yeah, oh, apparently there's still some blue back there, and green. These acting on clay. But yeah, this is just scrap stuff that usually kind of gets used for tripod components. And this is where all the oven baked clay keeps, well, in a box. I obviously need to kind of refresh in my inventory. This is just the white stuff. And then I have a color combination, which I usually have a mixture of white and black. And then I also have a little bit of black stuff, which I probably should buy more in bulk too, because I end up using this stuff quite a lot for claws. So yeah, that concludes the shelf tour over here. So here's a part of the studio that probably never really gets to be on camera up until, well, now. Mainly for the most part, because this is just kind of where I keep my basic hand tools and various other equipment. Nothing too fancy. There's a couple of craft supplies in there, but nothing, you know, very surreal. Where I keep my oven bake trays. This one's obviously now dedicated to mixing up clay because it's really dirty. And this is kind of my office art bag. Usually just kind of has a bunch of, well, sketchbooks and other art projects in there. I could probably go through that at some point too, but not during this video. And, well, there's some bionicle components in there too. Stuff that I probably shouldn't touch, but sometimes end up doing. However, this upper half is obviously a little bit more exciting. This is where I kind of keep my power tools. And this old drill press is unfortunately going to have to be retired very soon. It's starting to make some squeaking noises. It's about older than me, but it's definitely done a lot of, well, good old tricks and has saved me a lot of time and effort. But luckily we have that hand drill back there who is a trusty DeWalt and just kind of keeps on going. Any rate, this is also a very handy thing to have in your studio for, well, craft supplies. I hate sanding personally. I don't use it very frequently anymore. It came in handy a lot when I was making cars. But not so much anymore because, yeah, I don't necessarily need flat, smooth surfaces, but it's definitely a nice component to have because, wow, does it ever save a lot of time and effort because, yeah, you know, I used to do it by hand for hours, and we'll just make a quick demonstration because, yeah, this thing's got a lot more capabilities than my little hand going like this. So, very handy tool to have. Now, this is just kind of one of those other sections that's never going to be on camera except for this one rare opponent. Basically, this is kind of my off-camera desk where a lot of the time my streaming laptop tends to sit. But this is now kind of the new home for my little Lazy Susan for art supplies, where I keep, well, a pair of tweezers. Those are nice to have, especially when you're doing tiny little claw components and want to get details. I just keep a bunch of little rulers. Clay presses. This is actually probably pretty cool. A lot of you might actually kind of like this because basically you just put clay in there, you press it out, and it makes a nice little shape. And obviously, it comes with a variety of different little components, different presses. It's quite a lot of fun, but yeah, something that I bought and probably didn't need to. Then a lot of different paintbrushes. These are my nice fancy new ones. Ooh. The dirty ones are over there on that shelf, if you couldn't tell. Those ones are typically used for dry brushing. This is where I keep a lot of my wire lengths that are still probably okay to use, but nothing, you know, great. Stuff that I basically just don't want to throw. Yeah, I could probably still find a use for. And basically, there's a lot of, well, rolling tools and various other components in here for making clay. Now, I'll admit, the upper pocket half of this thing is really random. There's just all kinds of weird trinkets. This has a bunch of more small files in it, even more small ones. There's some weird painting supplies in here, a sponge if needed, more dry brushing, some old bad, ugly brushes. So if you're ever doing a lot of dry brushing, this is probably a good one to keep your old nasty brushes, because you don't want to ruin your new ones, obviously, because, yeah, it's going to get expensive after a little bit. And tip for you girls out there, if you have makeup brushes, apparently those work really well for actual, dry brushing. I have to try that at some point. And this is just kind of where I keep some random clay tools. There's a rake in here. I'll admit, this is just kind of miscellaneous stuff that I've collected over the years. I've never even used this tool, I think, once in my life, and I've probably had it for almost 20 plus years. But it's there. These ones are kind of cool. I've used these a couple times in the car making ones. This is basically a homemade rake with a guitar string. Basically, they're good for smoothing surfaces out by basically adding a whole bunch of hard lines, and then you can basically smooth things out with your hand. So it was actually really nice to basically make a very, very smooth surface. And of course, there's more, you know, car tools that have kind of sneaked their way into my workshop here. These tiny screwdrivers generally just come in handy for just about everything. So that pretty much concludes, well, the main workstations of my little stop motion studio. So we'll get on to the exciting part. The main art studio, the part that I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with. So there isn't really too much to brief on it because, well, it's basically just an art table, but this is basically where all of my characters are born. So we're just going to take this portion of the video to basically highlight a few of my favorite characters. Starting with King Ghidorah. Now, this three-headed dragon's obviously one of my favorites because it's probably one of the most challenging projects I've ever made due to the overall size, and having three nearly identical heads was definitely not an easy thing to make, unfortunately. Definitely well worth it in the end, however, I must admit this dragon did give me nightmares during the project. Now, I'll admit he's a little worse for wear at this particular point in time. Unfortunately, gravity and the passing time hasn't been too friendly to this character, so he is in need of a restoration, but that will be coming very soon. Now, some basic stats for this character. He stands in at 16 inches tall, which is one of the tallest characters I've ever made, with a 25-inch wingspan, and is approximately 11 pounds of clay. Now, Godzilla -1. Now, honestly, he's probably one of my favorite kaijus thus far, mainly because he actually is probably one of the most accurate Godzillas that I've made thus far, I must admit. And honestly, overall, is probably one of the most well-balanced characters that I've ever, well, had the pleasure of working with thus far, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing more animations with this guy in the future. Now, I should also admit this guy's in need of a bit of a restoration as well, but he's nowhere near as worse for wear as King Ghidorah. Now, I'm actually kind of looking forward to doing this restoration on this character because I'm basically planning on removing a lot of these spikes in the back and making them actually jut out like the actual movie monster. And it should also be mentioned, I plan on making him probably the main character for one of the other, well, stop-motion series I have planned in the near future here. Now, I definitely can't go without mentioning my original Godzilla, Gojira, or otherwise known as Fartzilla to some people, I guess. Basically, he's kind of the character that, well, started this all, and I'll admit he is really rough shape right now, mainly because he recently kind of went on a big rampage through, well, Lego City. So if you haven't seen that animation, be sure to check that out now, well, after this video. And this guy was basically the 1K celebration, where I was basically making dinosaurs for quite some time, so yeah. This guy is definitely the mark of the entire kaiju and monsterverse era that has kind of taken over the channel thus far, so thank you, Godzilla. Now, a quick honorable mention should definitely go over to Little Blue over here, because she is one of my favorites because she is honestly very cute, and is the dinosaur responsible for basically breaking 1K, and has led up to this point, you could say. And I can't go without mentioning, well, the primal zombie dinosaur either, because honestly, this guy is really cool and is probably one of the most popular dinosaurs on this channel so far, and I'm really looking forward to basically bringing this back, well, to life. Don't worry, I know some of you were a little concerned, but I have some plans to essentially kind of maybe have a certain monster try to terraform things, because he's been known to try and, well, wipe out the dinosaurs before. Not foreshadowing at all here, but yeah. Zombie dinosaur war. Or not zombie dinosaur war. Godzilla dinosaur war. I'm tired. Okay, a few more characters and we'll finish this video up.
Ignis, the fire-farting dragon.
Honestly, I know there's a ton of you guys out there that are a huge fan of this character and are probably very disappointed to see him in this kind of state. Now, bear with me, he is a very early, well, stop motion model, so unfortunately, there has been a lot of early mistakes on this character and is in desperate need of a restoration. So the return of Ignis will be coming soon. There's only a few more monsters I basically kind of want to make, perhaps a dinosaur, and then we'll have this fire-farting monster basically make his triumphant return. And a big reason I've been kind of putting it off mainly is because I kind of actually have to start over from scratch, and if I want to basically do some of the things I want, I'm basically gonna need a stunt double. So this original character is probably going to be the one that's going to get used and abused a lot, and we'll make a far more refurbished Ignis version probably within the next 2 or 3 months, give or take. Now I know you guys have been waiting very patiently for this guy, so I promise I haven't forgotten about the idea. He is probably one of the funniest original characters that I've made so far, and I really kind of miss working with him, so yes. Ignis will be back very soon, I promise that from this point on, so if you can't, you can, well, haggle me in the comments later on with past the point I've said. So yeah, within 2-3 months, if there is no return of Ignis, you can bug me then, okay? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video today. I know it's a lot different than what we usually do, you could say, but I know it was requested a few times on the live stream, so I wanted to kind of do this 4K celebration video with everyone and just kind of share where my workspace is for a vast majority of the time. There'll probably be more of these because there's a wiggly worm. Obviously, a lot more of this, yeah, stop motion stuff that there is. There's an entire set building process downstairs, as well as the sound room and a couple other shelves that I obviously haven't quite utilized, so I'll probably at some point do a return to this sort of video, for lack of a better description. And then at some point, basically kind of, well, conduct a giant supercut all together. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I know it's a little different. It was kind of a small request, and I know it was mostly for the live stream viewers who were probably hoping I was going to do it live. Now, I'll admit, I haven't done live streams lately because my channel is basically under review right now, so I just kind of want to make things easy for YouTube for them so they don't have nearly as much content to basically completely go through in order to monetize my channel. So yeah, obviously that's a really good news, so I can't thank you all enough for the support that I've been getting lately. This has been fantastic, and I plan on continuing working very hard for you, all of you, and I hope you enjoy this type of content. So yeah, I better get back to work on that photo count, for lack of a better description. So yeah, there will be a new animation coming out very soon, which I'm sure a lot of you have been basically being up to date on a lot of the, well, shorts, and if you're new here, be sure to check some of those out so you're kind of aware of what's going on, and, well, do a whole lot of other exploring, because there's a lot of cool creatures, monsters, dinosaurs, and various other things for you to check out here, as well as, yeah, the live streams as well, which generally has a lot of my, you know, fuzzy little co-hosts with me, including Little Miss Scooby. Yes, hello. So as always, if you enjoyed this video today, be sure to smash that like button as hard as a kaiju, as I like to say, and comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. And if you have any questions about the techniques I tend to use for my, well, stop motion dolls, or any of the tools, or various other parts of, well, the stop motion creation station here, let me know in the comments below. So yeah, be sure to stay tuned, because there should be a new monster fight coming out soon within a week, I'm hoping, so yeah. Have your post notifications turned on. Anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy. Wait, isn't there supposed to be a little claymation guy that oddly looks like me that says that at the end of the videos?